When it comes to deciphering black and white values, there are two main ways. Notan versus Chiaroscuro. Yeah, I know, two fancy words right off the bat. Let's start, however, with Notan. Notan is a Japanese design concept involving the play and placement of light and dark elements as they are placed next to each other in the composition of art and imagery. Okay, but what the heck does that mean? It's actually really simple. It just means putting light stuff and dark stuff right next to each other. That's the concept, but what we typically mean today is actually differing local values. Don't worry, I promise I'll explain more. Now, the concept of Notan derives from Japanese origin and is a Japanese design concept because in traditional Japanese woodblock print, artists were only really able to paint in flats. Rather than the Western style where people would actually mix paint together, in Japanese woodblock printing it made a lot more sense to just use a flat color since you were essentially just stamping it on. This means that the hair would be black, the skin would be another tone, and then the shirt another tone as well. Same thing here, you can see the skin is all one shade, the hair is all one shade, and then the shirt is either a red or a yellow, but they're all flat blocks of color. Let's take a look at Hokusai, one of the most famous ukiyo-e painters. You'll see that he's essentially painting only with local value. Local value means, what is this item with no shadows? So in this piece by Hokusai, you can see that in the wave, all the foam is one color, which is white, whereas the water is completely blue. And then the boat is another single solid color. And on the painting to the right, you'll see that the horse is a solid block of red, the humans are a white, and again, the foam of the water is white, and the water itself is blue. Additionally, the trees are a mixture of green and yellow. There isn't much shading going on necessarily, and each of these items are painted exactly one flat color. If you had to ask me if there was a light source in this piece, I wouldn't really say there is one, because the lighting is completely flat throughout. Let's take a look again at these two paintings. You'll see that just as I mentioned earlier, every single component of this painting are painted with a very flat value. And they're colored specifically with the local value. So essentially, what is this item without shadows? Well, in that case, hair without shadows is still just black. A skin without any shadow would just be this one solidified pale yellow-white color. And the same thing with the shirt. Or this guy's plaid robe. This is the idea of Notan, having these strong black and white elements next to each other. You'll see that the hair is a much darker color and it stands out starkly against the lighter skin. Now let's compare this to Rembrandt. Rembrandt was very famous at his time for his usage of light and shadow. In fact, if you had to ask anyone on the street about an artist who was just completely specialized in light and dark, most people would probably say Rembrandt. Let's quickly turn his paintings into black and white, and you'll see that there's a really strong usage of light and dark. Notice how this entire section right here is completely covered in essentially darkness. And then this little patch of skin is light. Or here as well, a giant patch of light skin versus a giant patch of a darker shadow. What differs Rembrandt's technique to a Japanese ukiyo-e painter is that the skin here, this shade right here, is the same exact value as the hair right there. Or for this man's skin, this darker tone skin, is the same kind of value as the darker tone of his frill or ruffle. So it almost disregards what the local value of the original object is. And instead, Rembrandt favors using light and dark to describe the shadow and light forms that light is casting onto his characters. It doesn't matter that the skin is a lighter color or that the shirt is a darker color. When he paints shadow, it all falls into darks. This is the concept of chiaroscuro. Chiaro means light, and roscuro means dark. Together, it means, well, light and dark, and has a Latin and Italian or Western origin. So if you compare it to Notan, this is what you should see. Let's quickly turn it into black and white. In Notan, the black and white values are determined by the local value, so the skin and the hair. However, in chiaroscuro, the values are determined by light, here, in the shadow. And now, to make it even easier, we don't even need to call it Notan and Chiaroscuro. We can call it simply local value and shadow value instead. Much simpler. Although, if you go to your friends and start saying Notan and Chiaroscuro, you can totally flex your cool art knowledge. So those are the two basic and main ways to categorize your black and white values. But let's talk about how to actually apply this to our own painting. Because in real life, we're not going to see either just Rembrandt paintings or Japanese woodblock paintings. Everything is actually on a scale. Some paintings are going to be more local value based, whereas other paintings will be more shadow value based. And some paintings are really just smack in the middle. So you get to decide when to use which method. And also, think about which one would suit you more. Notan paintings are great for describing the local value of something, so they give a lot of information, whereas Chiaroscuro paintings obviously tell you a lot more about light and shadow, so they're great for things like dramatic effect and to convey a certain mood. Let's take a look again at the road to perdition. In this example, you can see the black and white values work because they are separated by local value. You have the boy in his shirt, which is a very stark contrast from the pants, which stand out really well against this ocean right here. Not to mention his hair is also another value, dark black, against, again, this light ocean, which really gets to bring him out in a silhouette. Whereas in this screenshot, I would argue that this is based more off of Chiaroscuro. You see, there's light hitting his face and his hair. And you could argue that there is this almost imaginary line right here that separates the light and the shadow. Because he is the only character being lit, you can see that these characters don't really have any lights on them. Your eye will naturally go to this character in the middle. The opposite in this screenshot, where you'll see that everything is separated via local value. White sleeves are white, black vests are black, black suits are black, and white hair is white. And just to prove it to you even more, I'm gonna turn this piece into black and white, and you'll see that everything is basically flat blocks of value and color. All of these images are very orderly and they're designed in a stately manner. Now let's move on from movie frames into actual paintings. Let's check out some artworks by the incredible Ryan Lang. In this piece here that he did for the visual development of the movie Moana, I would argue that this piece is based off of a Notan, or local value black and white schematic. This is because the rocks would be one shade, the sand is one shade, the ocean is one shade, and the green is another shade. Yes, you can argue that there are some dark spots here, like some shadow here and there, but overall, if you turn the piece to black and white, the strongest differences in the dark and the light is between things like the rocks, the grass, the sand, ocean, and sky. So these are local value aspects. They are not shadow and light aspects. To explain a little further, let's take a look at another piece he did for Moana, where in this piece, I would argue, it's based off of a chiaroscuro or a shadow light value schematic. In this piece overall, there is this big mass of dark value right here, and another really big mass of a lighter color here. But you'll see that in these two masses, for example, in this dark mass here, it includes Tafiti, the goddess, as well as Moana, the girl, whereas the light value includes the waterfall's edge as well as the grass, which are all different objects and different things. And just to hit the concept home, you see that if we turn it into black and white, that statement stands true. All of the dark values are because they are in a shadow, whereas all the light values are because they're being hit by a light. Very different from the piece that we were talking about earlier, aka this piece over here. This is the difference between a light and dark value schematic versus a local value schematic. It is super important to recognize these patterns and understand what makes a piece work in black and white. And to really just drive the concept home even further, I've got a super short demo to show you. Here is a photo of Shirley Temple. If I were to paint her using local values, I would paint it like this, where her skin is one value, her hair is another value, and her dress is another value. Whereas if I wanted to paint Shirley according to shadow values, then this is how I would paint. You'll see that the main black and white differentiation is now between the lights and the darks. So just keep that in mind when you're painting your own pieces or doing studies. Ask yourself if the thing that you're looking at is mainly based off of a local value schematic or a light and shadow value schematic. You're never gonna have one that leans completely towards one way or the other. It's always a balance. But typically, you want to lean a little bit more towards one side versus the other. Because when you're stuck directly in the middle, it's sometimes a little bit too confusing. The stronger your eye becomes, the more you'll be able to naturally do it yourself. Super quick side story, but I am a huge fan of pancakes. I like to make pancakes a lot myself, and my family has a really fun tradition of pancake Sundays. A few years ago, I saw on the internet that there was this cafe in Japan that served the most amazing pancakes ever. They were like super thick. And I saw it and I said to myself, oh my god, I have to go. So I made sure the first thing I did when I returned to Japan was I went to this cafe. Here are my photos that I took myself personally of the pancakes that I got to eat. Oh my god, it was the most amazing pancake I had ever eaten. It tastes even better than it looks, if that's even possible. But here's the thing. After I ate those pancakes, I realized how subpar my own pancakes were. My homemade pancakes didn't taste anything like these pancakes. They weren't as soft, they weren't as sweet, and their color wasn't this nice either. But now I had a benchmark. Perhaps I'm not able to make pancakes as good as this. But the next time that I made my own homemade pancakes, I kept adjusting my recipe so that it would hopefully get closer and closer to this absolute banger of a pancake. The same thing for art. The reason I'm telling you all this stuff is so that you yourself have a benchmark. You need to develop your own eye to know what is strong black and white values. And then naturally, your own black and white values will improve too, because you have set yourself a standard. And that is so important. So if you ever have a piece you really like, just try turning it into black and white. In fact, let me show you a few ways as to how. Alright, so here we have this piece here and we want to turn it into black and white. One of the first and easiest things to always do is you go up here to image, you go to adjustments, then you go to hue saturation, or you can go to vibrance. Either one of these will work, but let's choose hue saturation. So that I'm just going to take the saturation all the way down. And that is one method for turning things into black and white. So here's the second way of doing it. So originally you were all the way up here, but now you're going to travel all the way down here. You see we're zooming in just so you can see it better. You're going to click this little half moon and you're going to click hue saturation here. And that is your adjustment layer. And then you're going to move the slider to your liking. So the question is, okay, well, what was the difference? Well, the difference is that this is basically kind of like a giant blanket. If I simply took this photo, or not photo, I should say painting, and I turned it into black and white, let's say that here, I'm just gonna draw this stick person right here. Clearly, they're now a part of the painting, you know, they are very integral to the painting. And I turn my piece into black and white like so. I go into hue saturation, I turn it down, like that. But oh no, my stick figure, which is on a different layer, doesn't get turned black and white. That is awful. Oh no, well whatever shall we do? Well, thankfully, there is this thing called a hue saturation adjustment layer, which is think of it as like a giant blanket. All you have to do is turn it on, so turn on the visibility like so. Ta-da! And now your stick figure is also going to be in black and white along with the original painting. Now, one of my favorite ways to turn things into black and white as well, let me show you an even better way. It just takes a little bit of a setup. The first time will be a little bit difficult, but that's it. It's not even that difficult. I'm really just hyping it too much up here. So you're going to here to view, and then you're going to proof setup, and you're going to also go for custom. So I'm just going to click it really quickly. And if you first start off, it's gonna probably set you up with Apple RGB or some other like one of these things. No problem. This is super easy to change. All you gotta do is click it and you go to dot gain 20%. Why specifically 20%? Honestly, I'm not really too sure either. Every single person I've ever talked to has always done .gain 20%, and it's supposed to be the most accurate. And then you just click OK. So what did I just do? All you have to do now is to click Control Y on your keyboard. So right now, I'm literally just clicking Control Y and I'm flipping back and forth, probably giving you a little bit of a headache watching this, but back and forth into black and white. And that is my absolute favorite method. Now, there is no right or wrong way to do any of this stuff. In fact, if you really wanted to be super janky, technically you could take a photo of your screen with your phone. So here's your phone and then this is your computer screen. Take a photo and then go into your photo settings on your phone and change it to black and white. Okay, the options are endless, but hopefully you don't have to resort to that method, and instead you can just click Control Y instead. Once you look at some of your favorite artists' paintings and how they kind of tackle black and white values and understanding like that benchmark, you'll be able to kind of get a grasp and understand values a little bit better yourself. So now let's jump into a recap of everything we did so far.